Good morning, Pinky.
Mendel's again.
Precisely. Who's got the throat slitter?
Pastries and prison escape. It's hard to find an adjective that accurately encompasses this level of peculiarity. Quirky, twee, zany? No. The only way to describe it is simply Wes Anderson. Okay, so I know you're just dying to hear about Wes Anderson, but before I begin, I would like to thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video. So if you don't know what Skillshare is, it's an online learning community that promotes creativity and building up your skills in subjects such as photography, videography, marketing, graphic design, illustration, the like. Whether you're an amateur or whether you're a pro, there are classes for everyone. I'm personally really excited to take the class Real Productivity, How to Build Habits That Last, taught by Thomas Frank. I'm going back to school soon. I don't know what a sleep schedule is, I don't know what a routine is, and I'm going to need help, so I'm really excited to take that class. A great thing about Skillshare is that it is really tailored for learners. There are no ads, so you can't be distracted, and they are always adding new classes so that you can constantly challenge yourself and your creativity. Also, with an annual subscription, you only pay a little under $10 a month. Guys, I'm not just going to sit here and talk about this and not help you guys out, because the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in my description will get a free trial of the premium Skillshare membership, so you guys can explore your creativity. Okay guys, back to the video. Wes Anderson is a filmmaker who is widely considered a modern auteur. Satisfying symmetry and color palettes centered around worlds are his signature strong suits. He uses his heavy directorial hand to show us fake hotels, unbelievable families, and star-crossed lovers. Most people can agree that Wes Anderson is a visionary, but the biggest qualm surrounding his films is that they are pretty and nothing more. An anonymous cinema critic, in an article entitled "Why I Hate Wes Anderson," wrote, "Although his characters hold a sense of intrigue due to their uniqueness and quirks, no true human qualities and complexities are shown. He creates an interesting world of abnormal characters, most of which have been child prodigies, yet he does nothing to develop these people and give the audience a true sense of who and why they are. In pursuit of finding the perfectly whimsical mansion or crafting a dollhouse submarine, are crucial elements like character development and overall meaning in Wes Anderson's films lost? Are they pretty faces with nothing to say?" While his previous works remain in snow globish bubbles of worlds, Wes Anderson's The Grand Budapest Hotel shows that poignantly capturing real-world issues need not be at the expense of whimsy. In fact, this rendering is one the world needs most now. Aristotle wrote, "From childhood, men have an instinct for representation, and in this respect man differs from other animals that he is far more imitative and learns his first lessons from representing things." Anderson's means of representation is film, and there's something about his veil of pastel, precise mise-en-scène, and eccentric characters that makes messy reality more palatable and our minds more susceptible to view those aspects of reality from a different perspective. Anderson's films closely abide to the theory of auteurism, a type of postmodern cinema that has an unwavering distinctive voice. Every aspect on screen is a direct representation of how a director perceives it in the context of his or her life. Born Wesley Wells Anderson, Wes Anderson even has the kind of name that a student at his fictional Rushmore Academy probably would have borne. Anderson's parents divorced when he was a young child, an event that he has described as the most crucial event of my brother's and my growing up. This critical incident has influenced most of Anderson's films via the dysfunctional family trope, most famously found in Rushmore and the Royal Tenenbaums. Though Anderson's films typically feature fractured families and even farther fractured individuals, the settings and physical appearances of these emotionally tumultuous characters remain perfectly intact. Margot Tenenbaum was deeply depressed, yet at all times her eyes were precisely lined, bejeweled barrette in place, and iconic fur coat perfectly fluffed. In the Royal Tenenbaums, when Eli crashes his car and Etheline's wedding, a punchy drum beat kicks in after an awkward silence, and a hilarious chase scene ensues.
What's that?
Eli just crashed his car into the front of the house.
Oh my God.
In typical Wes Anderson fashion, the scene was filmed as a continuous tracking shot, which requires precise choreography and planning, so even when there is chaos, it's carefully calculated. In an interview with NPR, Anderson said, "I have my own way of blocking things and framing things that's built into me. I compare it to handwriting. I don't fully understand it, why my handwriting is like this, but in a way, there's some sort of tonal thing with the kind of stories I do." Anderson's extreme attention to detail tends to coat his films with an acute layer of superficiality. Some people can't get into Wes Anderson films simply because they are so explicitly out of them. Yet, isn't creating a world without abandon, fully immersing oneself into a make-believe place, as authentic as one can get? Looking at his films individually, that's exactly what Wes Anderson seems to do with his deeply specific characters and worlds. There's Rushmore and Max Fisher's extensive list of extracurricular activities, and the Royal Tenenbaums with Margot's oddly specific custom four-fingered glove. But when one zooms out and looks at these works as a whole, side by side, they resemble a display of cotton candy. Each is a different color, but they are all made from the same substance. Anderson's recipe consists of a disaffected protagonist dealing with some sort of trauma whose plans, be it a heist, family reunion, etc., go horribly wrong despite the thorough planning that's involved. But perhaps it isn't fair to look at Wes Anderson's films simply from a macro perspective, but rather as a progressing series of works in conversation with one another. Rushmore and The Aquatic Life of Steve Zissou were about eccentric men and their meticulous plans. The Royal Tenenbaums started a conversation about mental health, and The Grand Budapest Hotel, Wes Anderson's eighth and most critically acclaimed feature film, is what appears to be his first attempt in making a statement outside of the confectionery colored worlds of his films. It seems as if Wes Anderson's proverbial snow globe has, in a sense, cracked under the pressure of the outside world. The Grand Budapest Hotel takes place during the 1930s in Eastern Europe. The film follows esteemed concierge M. Gustave and his loyal lobby boy Zero. Due to a series of unfortunate events, the duo must traverse through the foothills of Eastern Europe to escape an angry heiress and his ruthless henchmen, all against the backdrop of a festering fictional war. Regarding his choice to go the length of creating a fictional country in war, Anderson said, "Part of why I feel the impulse to reimagine World War II rather than just do it is because it's been done so many times before. The reason I want to engage with it is because the series of events in Europe are still somehow right in the middle of our lives." It might be fair to call Wes Anderson's films out of touch. A good chunk of his movies are centered around white people from old money. In the Grand Budapest Hotel, one particular narrated montage describes the typical guests at the Grand Budapest as rich, old, insecure, vain, superficial, blonde, and needy. Anderson seems to poke fun at himself here, as the aforementioned adjectives are the core attributes of a typical Wes Anderson character. There's an element of self-awareness and awareness of the audience that Anderson exhibits here. Some of Wes Anderson's earlier films are of arguably purely aesthetic merit, yet the Grand Budapest Hotel implores not to be just another package of cotton candy in a display case. Throughout the Grand Budapest Hotel, Zero, the migrant lobby boy and only non-white character in the film, is harassed by guards at the border of Zubrowka concerning the validity of his papers. He carries a migratory visa with stage 3 worker status. When the train is stopped at the border, M. Gustave protests to the border police. You can't arrest Zero simply because he's a bloody immigrant. Here, Anderson seems to drift from his allegiance to storybook tales. Although his other films address desire, betrayal, and even almost incest, his previous works seem to drown in whimsical aesthetic, making the actual issues the films address come off as melodramatic at most. This is Anderson's first time addressing a public trauma, and it manages to stay afloat in the midst of an extravagant pseudo-Art Deco set. Even purely aesthetic representation of fictional persons and events can never be completely divorced from political and ideological questions, W.J.T. Mitchell writes in his essay, Representation. Anderson seems to be well aware of this notion based off one particular scene in the Grand Budapest Hotel. After M. Gustave escapes from jail, He's extremely frustrated with Zero for forgetting his signature L'air de Panache perfume. In his wave of anger, he makes offensive and ethnocentric assumptions pertaining to Zero's home country, Ak Salim al-Jabat. He goes as far as asking, "What on God's earth possessed you to leave the homeland where you obviously belong and travel unspeakable distances to become a penniless immigrant in a refined, highly cultivated society that, quite frankly, could have gotten along very well without you?" Zero simply answers, straight-faced, "The war." He explains that his father was murdered, the remainder of his family were executed, his village was burned down, and the survivors were forced to flee. Upon realizing Zero is a refugee, M. Gustave remorsefully replies, "I suppose I'd better take back everything I just said." The scene concludes with the pair hugging and Zero affirming, "We're brothers." This scene is a representation of the conversation surrounding refugee and immigration policies in countries around the world. When the film was released in 2014, Europe would be experiencing one of its largest influx of refugees and migrants due to the Syrian war. The surge of non-native peoples stirred up tension and xenophobia in Europe, and of course, the sentiment reminds me of the conversation surrounding immigration from the southern border in the country I live in, the United States. This scene in the Grand Budapest Hotel idealizes what the conversation around immigration could look like. By conversation, I don't mean the 24-hour news cycle that bombards viewers with more divisive opinions than information, but what it could look like if two people from diametrically opposed backgrounds, like a European and a Middle Eastern migrant, could see eye to eye as humans without the labels of religion, nationality, or political affiliation. Those types of conversations, on the smallest of scales, can be more poignant and effective than any town hall or news debate. And I hope this scene could have inspired a few of those conversations to occur. In recent years, social issues have been brought to pop culture through seemingly innocent movies. Zootopia, a Disney feature, tackled racial profiling and sexism via an animated Animal Kingdom. Finding Dory from Pixar shed light on accepting differences and disabilities through beloved sea creatures. The Grand Budapest Hotel sublimely showed a fictional war with relevant issues of immigration and ethnocentrism. These films take social issues out of their context in the real world and place them in immersive fictional places, covering prejudices with prettiness. Sugarcoating isn't widely considered a positive thing. People want the good, the bad, and the ugly unadulterated. But the most literal definition of sugarcoating, glossing over real issues, isn't all that bad if the layer of whimsy is sheer enough. It affords a bittersweet taste after consumption, bitter due to the cold hard truth, sweet due to the clever means of representation, whether it's animation, satire, or an aesthetically pleasing set. It sometimes takes that sweetness for a bitter truth to change not only minds, but hearts.